Everyone, welcome to the February 23rd, 2026 meeting of the Lee County Local Planning Agency. I would ask the county attorney, have you reviewed the affidavit of publication?
Good morning. For the record, Amanda Swindle at the County Attorney's Office. I have reviewed the affidavit of publication and it is legally sufficient.
Thank you very much. You'll all rise. Let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Wherein this is a public hearing, if you are here to speak about something not on the agenda, this is your moment to do that. At this time, I'd also like to remind those that do wish to speak, we wish to hear from you. The public input is crucial to this process. Janet, our administrative coordinator over here, if you haven't already done so and you wish to speak, please fill out a card and Janet will then get it to me. Given that this is our first LPA meeting of 2026, it is incumbent upon me to have an election of officers. We will be electing a chairman and a vice chairman, and I leave it to the LPA for their nominations to do same.
I'll make a motion to nominate Stan Stoddard as chair.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We now need to...
Are you in favor?
I am in favor. I am in favor. Thank you. We need to elect a vice chair. Would we have a nomination from the floor for that?
I'll nominate Don Schwartenberger.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Don, are you amenable
I
to?
am.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Agenda item number 4 is approval of minutes from our December 8th, 2025 meeting. Anyone like to make a motion about that?
I'll make a motion to approve as stated.
Have a second?
I'll second.
Have a second. Any discussion? Any annotations? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That brings us to our first agenda item of 5A, first applicant, I should say. And agenda item 5A is for CPA 2025-3, US 41, Pugliese Multifamily Map Amendment. The application is to amend the Lee Plan Map 1A Future Land Use Map to change the future land use category of the 13.2 acre subject property from suburban to urban community. The property is located approximately 1/10 of a mile north of the intersection of South Tamiami Trail and Timber Lakes Drive. It had been brought to my attention that there is counsel for the applicant, and that each of you, if you signed a card, you're welcome to your 3 minutes, but because we have counsel, we have granted on this one occasion that counsel and a co-presenter will have a 10-minute window of time to equally or to share their comments. Other than that, we'll be sticking to the 3 minutes. Do we have an applicant?
Good morning, members of the LPA, Mr. Chairman. Richard Aiken, Henderson Franklin, here this morning on behalf of the applicant for the Pugliese Multifamily Small Scale Map Amendment. I have here with me Al Quattrone, who's the project engineer and land use consultant. Yuri Baikal with TR Transportation is also here this morning if you have any questions related to traffic. As stated, this is a request to amend the future land use from suburban, which it currently is, to urban community. It's a 13.2 acre parcel. You can see it's outlined here in red on the slide before you. It's got frontage on US 41. The forest community is directly behind it back to the west. It's approximately 1.5 miles south of where 6 Mile Cypress intersects with US 41 or Tamiami Trail. The property just to the south of this is a Wayne Wiles Flooring property, so it's a commercially developed property. The properties to the north are also commercially developed properties. Zoning on the property right now is C1, so it's got a C1 zoning today. Across the street, you've got a various number of mixed type of commercial uses and some light industrial uses as well as you move further to the east. So the standard density, or the density total maximum, or maximum standard density, as I'll call it, under the Lee plan for both suburban and urban community is 6 units per acre. It's the same number. The difference with urban community is that the total maximum density is 10 units to an acre, right? So if you use site-built affordable housing, you can, or some of the bonus density programs, you can get an additional 4 units to the acre. In the suburban category, you can also get up to 8 if you use some of the other bonus transfer density programs. That's really the most significant, or I would say the primary change that you would see if you read through the suburban and urban community guidelines and policies in the comprehensive plan. The discussion that's in the staff report and that if you read through the application of the staff report, you would see that there was a discussion about this project being a multifamily housing project at some point in time. I will tell you that at this moment in time, there is no companion rezoning with the property. It's just a map amendment here as you're hearing today. The developer at this point in time, Land America and Puglisi, they don't exactly know what's going to go with the property at a future time. They've considered multifamily. That's obviously what was being discussed when the plan amendment came in to be analyzed. They're still looking at a commercial use, as I'm sure many of you know and understand. At this point in time, the multifamily market is a little bit saturated. The market's changed a little bit, so they're not at a point where that's definitely what they're going to do. They're still looking at commercial, mixed use, other options for this property. And they believe, with it being fronting on a major arterial roadway, which is 41, that it's an appropriate place for any of those potential uses. Staff did find the request consistent with the Lee plan, and they recommended transmittal. Here you have the two policies discussing the suburban future land use and the urban community future land use in front of you. These are the two that we're really comparing. So the primary difference here is that you'll see that the urban community future land use are areas characterized by a mixture of relatively intense commercial and residential uses. So the commercial intensity is a little bit higher, as is the residential density, can be just slightly higher anyway than that in the suburban future land use. You'll also notice that the urban community future land use encourages a mix of uses. It also does allow, through a plan development rezoning, for you to have a light industrial use if you were to want to do that. At this point in time, again, there is no specific plan as to what would go there, and that would have to be done through a PD to ensure compatibility with the surrounding uses. Currently, as I said, has a C1 zoning on the property. So this is the location map, just zoomed out slightly more so you can see where it is. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this area. Property highlighted in red, frontage 13.2 acres on Tamiami Trail, south of 6 Mile Cypress. It's basically right there at the fork where old US 41 cuts over to the east, I'll call it. You can see the future and existing proposed future land use map. So all of the property that's on the other side of 41 is already in the urban community future land use. This property is currently suburban, and the side of the road, there are some other land uses further north and south, but right here, it would be an extension of the urban community across US 41, so it's directly abutting. I will state that the staff report characterizes this property as infill. There's not a lot of properties up and down 41 in this area that don't already have development, not a lot of vacant properties, so this is one of them. There's nothing on it. The staff report actually finds that the urban community future land use is more consistent with the current location and makeup of this property than the suburban future land use category, which is what it currently is in today. So you can see a little bit more about it here. You've got 2 parcels, 13.2 acres. It talks a little bit about what's to the east and the west. There are some RM2 zone properties to the west. There's also some properties that are light industrial over to the east, as well as C1 on the east. To the west, you've also got the forest community, which I think there's some members of the forest here today that want to talk to you, so they are here today. But the forest is obviously a planned development. Forest and residential uses. There's some limited multifamily as well as single-family residential in there. Predominantly commercial uses line 41 in this specific area. So these are the public facilities, and I'm going to let Al Quattrone come up here and talk just a little bit about the public facilities that are in place, the urban facilities such as sewer, water, transit, things of that nature. Al?
Good morning, Al Quattrone with Quattrone and Associates. Yes, as Richard mentioned, we've reached out to the various public facilities providers as far as fire, emergency medical services, utilities, public transit, schools, police, solid waste, and they've all indicated that they have adequate capacity for the project, even under a most intense development of this property. It is served by Lee County Utilities with both water and sewer, so that's not an issue there. Now, as far as traffic, we do have Yuri here to speak, but Lee County and us have gone through the analysis, and again, they looked at the most intense use of the property, and they've acknowledged that the property will not have an adverse impact on the current level of services of the facilities in the area. So as far as Lee Plan, the site is presently designated suburban on the future land use map, and the area has been widely developed with residential commercial uses since the designation of the suburban community. Changing the property to urban community future land use will provide opportunities for increased development of economic growth within the area that can support the growth. As mentioned, the primary access site will be provided by US 41, which is a state-maintained arterial roadway. Secondary access will be through a frontage road that extends north to Jonathan's Bay. So we envision both a connection to that frontage road as well as likely a right-in, right-out on US 41. The subject property, according to compliance with policy 5.1.5, the subject parcels are located in an area characterized by a mix of existing residential and commercial development. Policy 5.1.6, the proposed development will maintain the requirement of 40% open space if developed as multifamily or 30% if developed as commercial in regards to the large commercial design standards. We'll also be providing the required buffers, landscaping, and drainage. Policy 5.2.4, the request will ensure that the property is developed with uses similar to neighboring properties. Policy 2.2.1, there are existing commercial developments offering employment and shopping opportunities along US 41 that already include restaurants, businesses, and shopping centers. Policy 5.3 is subject properties in areas surrounded by existing residential and commercial development. The requested increase in density is consistent with the surrounding area and provides for additional infill development in an area where existing public facilities are already available. 5.1.5, an area characterized by a mix of existing residential and commercial requested future land use map amendment from suburban to urban would allow for infill development that is compatible to surrounding land use patterns and supported by existing infrastructure. Policy 37.1.3, the proposed land use will have no adverse impact on level of service of the adjacent roads. Then policy 1.4, the project will be designed in accordance with the latest South Florida requirements, will not be altering water levels, and both on-site or off-site, and the project will provide the required water quality and quantity attenuation. Again, as far as access, we talked about that the property just north of Wayne Wiles will likely be able to achieve or get a right-in, right-out on US 41. They wouldn't have full access because of spacing issues, but again, we do have, or will have access to the US 41 service road that leads up to Jonathan Bay's intersection. As far as water management, I just want to touch on this a little bit. So the property right now is surrounded on the west by the forest, the east, US 41, south is Wayne Wiles, and to the north is development. So we're fully developed on all four sides. The current drainage patterns, pretty much the easterly third of the property is already draining to US 41. The rear portion of the property drains to an area, it's called a borrow pit. Looking back in the aerials from 1953, this borrow pit existed as far back as then. And then it's over time, it's overgrown, kind of taken on some wetland characteristics. But essentially, it's a man-made feature where the majority of the water flows to. On the right-hand side, you can see the proposed drainage plan. What we envision for a drainage plan is putting in a water management pond in the general vicinity of that borrow pit area, and then attenuating our water for both water quality and quantity, and then rerouting our discharge to US 41 into the ditch. We'll obviously have to go through FDOT for a drainage permit for that. Historical resources. Per the Florida Master Site File, there are not any previously recorded cultural historical resources located within 150 feet of the subject property. For the archaeological sensitivity map, a site about 360 feet southwest of the subject property is identified as sensitivity 2. You can see that's area in the very bottom left corner. It's a little bit shaded greenish. So in conclusion, the future land use change from suburban to urban will allow for mixed-use infill development with both residential uses and supportive neighborhood commercial uses. The property is located within a mature, developed area of Lee County, as evidenced by surrounding land use densities and intensities. The site is in proximity to goods, services, recreation, and public infrastructure. Flexibility in the uses for the subject site will not provide for additional intensity, nor provide for any deficiencies or impact the public health, safety, or welfare. From the residential standpoint, it will allow for the potential increase of density from suburban to urban, as Richard mentioned. Urban community will continue to protect the natural resources and environmental features of the property through compliance with the Land Development Code. It will efficiently utilize the existing public facilities and services in the area. The change will allow for continued support of mixed-use development in an appropriate location, thereby accommodating growth in areas intended by Lee County Comprehensive Plan. This narrative confirms that the proposed request from suburban to urban is consistent with Lee Plan and the Land Development Code for future land use. So with that, I'll open up to any questions for Richard or myself.
Any questions from the LPA?
I have a question.
Jennifer?
Do you know if the property is in coastal high hazard?
It is.
So then the affordable housing then wouldn't apply?
So I think that the bonus.
Or the bonus density, the
Yeah,
increased
so you
density.
can't use TRUs, Pine Island TRT, transferable development units cannot be used because it's in the coastal high hazard. There are also some other provisions that we have to keep in mind when dealing with coastal high hazard, but we've been working through that as part of the application process. So.
And I also had a question on the borrow pit. Is that designated as a wetland then, counting against your density if you impact it, or is it designated then as just a water, other surface water?
I think that's still to be determined because the fringes of it are starting to get obviously some wetland characteristics, but the question would be whether or not, since it's a man-made feature designed for holding water, whether or not it truly is a wetland. And we have not gone through the South Florida wetland JD process to determine that, so that's where we still got to work through that.
Thank you.
But if you look at the back, the 1953 aerials, again, I'm no biologist, but everything on the property, with the exception of the borrow pit, looked fairly dry. It didn't look like it had, wetland-type historical features.
So that would be something you'd have to work out during zoning?
Or through the development order process in Lee County, yes.
Thank you.
Hank, anything?
Oh, yeah, thanks. Mr. Egan, assuming the FLU to urban community was approved, you said you had not made a decision as to the future use?
Yes, sir. And when I say the client, obviously, yes, has not. They don't know exactly what it will be.
I'm confused then about how you could make a decision with regard to the capacity of both utilities, roads, et cetera, if the different kind of options might still be available.
Sure. So those are all analyzed assuming the most intense use, which I believe was retail shopping. And so Yuri's here when he analyzed everything with regard to the traffic and conversations with Lee County staff. They did so based on assuming the most intense use with the most intense traffic. That's how they got there. Same thing would be true for urban services. What's the maximum amount that we could use or need, demand, and that's how they analyze that.
Thank you.
So if it's less, then it'll still be within it. The other thing I guess I would point out is the property. Well, I could use that slide. It's obviously fronting on US 41, and there are several land development code provisions that talk about if you want to use increased or higher densities. They encourage them, especially if you want to do site-built affordable housing, for example, not allowed to direct additional densities through areas with significantly lower residential densities. So even if it was something that went to multifamily, the location with frontage on US 41, and then you can see on the northern end of the property here, you can see there's this frontage road that there's the ability to punch out to and then go further up north to, I think it's Jonathan's Bay, right? So with those characteristics of it, both frontage on US 41 and the ability to punch out north there, and again, if there is increased traffic, these are the types of places that from a planning perspective, the county would like to have additional traffic simply because they don't have to go through, collector roads or minor roadways. It's on a major arterial, which makes a whole lot more sense.
I would also compliment you, and even if it's a peripheral consideration at this point, on the affordable housing inclusion.
Yes, sir.
That density bonus has always been available. It's not always taken. So
Yes, sir.
thank you for considering it.
Thank you. Dawn, did you have a question?
I just wanted to confirm, so since you're unable to use the Greater Pine Island TDUs, that means you'll be unable to reach the 15 dwelling units per acre. The maximum will be 10, correct?
Right, so in order to do, to get to 10, you would have to go site-built affordable. I'm looking back at Brandon to make sure I've got that right. Yes, you cannot use Pine Island transferable development densities, or any other TDUs cannot be used on the property because there's more than just Pine Island and Lee County. They're not allowed to be used because it's in the coastal high hazard. That is correct.
Thank you.
You good? Expound, if you will. I noticed that, Al, you had mentioned a right in, right out on 41 and the frontage road from Jonathan Bay. Is it considered that that would be punched through to Wayne Wiles? And is Jonathan Bay a signalized intersection?
No, Jonathan Bay is not signalized. It's our understanding that there are no easements on Wayne Wiles' property to give us the ability to connect to front.
There are none?
Not that we're aware of.
Okay.
So obviously, the goal of the Lee County would be for us to connect to frontage road all the way through, and they'll most likely, at time of development order, at least make us provide an easement to our southernmost border. So if in the future Wayne Wiles ever wants to connect to it, they would have that ability.
So traffic would access at the unsignalized Jonathan Bay via the frontage road or a right in, right out?
That's what we envision, yes.
Okay, I have other questions, but I'll hold them for staff. Any other questions for the applicant? All right. Thank you. Staff want to?
Thank you.
Good morning. Lindsay Karcheski with the Planning Section. The first case before you is the Pugliese Comprehensive Plan Map Amendment. This is case CPA 2025-00003. The request is to amend map 1A, the future land use map, to redesignate an approximately 13-acre property to the urban community future land use category from suburban. This amendment will facilitate development in an established urban area. On the left is the existing future land use map, and on the right is the proposed. The future land use map doesn't depict any wetlands on the property. However, the application materials do indicate that wetlands are present. If a jurisdictional determination depicts wetlands on the property, future development will be required to meet state requirements. Oh, they can. Hello? Is that better? Okay. Also note that the subject property is adjacent to other urban community properties. The subject property is comprised of 2 parcels abutting the west side of South Tamiami Trail and is directly adjacent to the northeastern portion of the Forest Country Club. The 2 parcels are currently zoned C1 commercial, and the subject property is undeveloped at this time. The urban community future land use category is described as areas characterized by a mixture of relatively intense commercial and residential uses. Vacant properties in this category ideally have public services in place, ready to accommodate future development. The subject property is in an area consisting of commercial, residential, and light industrial zoning. It directly abuts a major arterial and other urban community designated properties, and all public services are in place. The suburban future land use category is described as predominantly residential areas with the full mix of land uses, typical of urban areas except for industrial land uses. Given the characteristics of the area, the suburban category no longer represents the subject property, and staff agree with the applicant that the proposed amendment is more suitable. As aforementioned, public facilities and infrastructure are in place, facilitating future infill development of this site. The applicant has also provided the letters of availability from the the required service providers consistent with Objective 2.2. Policy 5.1.5 protects existing and future residential areas from the encroachment of uses that are potentially destructive to the character and integrity of the residential environment. The frontage on US 41 enables future access to the site to be served from the arterial, and the state of the surrounding area is a mixture of residential, commercial, and light industrial uses. The property is currently zoned C1 commercial, and the applicant has not indicated any plans to rezone the property. Future development will be required to adhere to land development codes pertaining to buffering between properties and other development regulations, all demonstrating consistency with policy 5.1.5. The subject property is within the coastal high hazard area, and policy 101.1.4 requires that comprehensive plan amendments, which increase density within the coastal high hazard area, meet certain criteria. In this case, the standard densities are not being increased as both the suburban and urban community land use categories permit a standard density of 1 to 6 dwelling units per acre. Urban community may allow additional bonus density. However, if an applicant requests such density, they must provide appropriate mitigation. Additionally, staff will review the proposal and determine its appropriateness with the Lee plan, specifically Goal 101 and Policy 101.1.4 and Policy 101.3.5. The subject property's location along major arterial US 41, its adjacency to other urban community properties, and its capability to serve the community through existing public services and infrastructure present an opportunity for future infill development within the county. Coastal high hazard, FEMA floodplain, and LDC requirements will be addressed and met at the time of a development order, and the applicant has provided the required documentation for the proposed amendment. Based off this analysis and the staff report, staff is recommending approval of the proposed amendment as shown in attachment 1. And staff is available for questions.
Thank you.
Yes.
Questions for staff? Anybody? Hank?
Go ahead.
Don? Questions? So I have a question pertaining to policy 5.1.5. It's in staff report, page 5 of 9, and it deals with buffering. And it does say that requests for conventional rezonings will be denied in the event that the buffers provided in the LDC Chapter 10 are not adequate, and it goes on to say planned developments and special exceptions are also subject to buffering. Can you expound on that for me?
I defer that to Brandon or Kate.
What is your question again? I mean, do you want to know the specific buffers that will be required? That might be a little beyond what I can do.
Not asking you to do that because we don't have the use yet, but to find this consistent with the future land use, policy 5.1.5 protects existing and future residential areas from any violation of uses that could be harmful to the character and integrity of the residential environment. And then it reproduces the policy below, and I excerpt that. Requests for conventional rezonings will be denied in the event that the buffers provided in the LDC Chapter 10 are not adequate. This is not a rezoning, we know that. But it does speak to, and it extends to, planned developments. So I would like, for the sake of this hearing, for you to expound on what that means if I were the residential occupant behind this.
As the staff report noted, there will be required buffers that would be identified at the time of development order or rezoning, depending on what comes next, and the use that is identified for the property. Those buffers, we have standard buffers that are in Chapter 10 of the Land Development Code. If those buffers are not deemed to be adequate, depending on what that use is, and to protect the multifamily use that is back within the Forest Country Club, staff could recommend or require that this go through a process such as a plan development, where we could work more closely with the developer and the applicant to identify buffers that would better protect the residential areas surrounding the property.
By better, that could be wider, more
It could be
dense?
wider, it could be more additional plant materials. I've seen buffers where, they make them wider in certain locations and then kind of narrow them down. So like I said, we work with the developers and the applicants to make sure that the uses are shielded from the surrounding residential community.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions? Right, thank you. This is a public hearing. We have a number of members from the public that would like to speak, and if I'll first speak of the applicant or the speaker that's to come, and then the one that's on deck. So we'll start with, and forgive me if I don't get your names correctly, Max Forgy, and on deck will be Scott Razor. So Katie and okay, well then we'll start with you two, and because you're counsel for the applicant, co-counsel, then you'll be given 10 minutes, but the others will be given 3 per the administrative code. Thank you.
All right, just checking the audio. Can everyone hear me in the back okay? Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Katie Berkey. I am a certified planner by the American Institute of Certified Planners, and here today as legal counsel to the Forest Property Owners Association that is immediately adjacent to the subject properties, subject to the contemplated map amendment. I'm also board certified in city and county and local government law by the Florida Bar. And as an initial matter, I circulated a package on behalf of the association to be submitted into the record in this case. It includes a request for the association to be accepted as an affected person under Chapter 163 in all hearings on this case, as well as an expert planning report from Mr. Forgy and his resume, who will follow me in speaking today. I've also included correspondence with county staff from February 12th and a copy of the Excella case status page as of Friday the 20th for reference. And a copy has been provided to counsel for the applicant. As to affected person status, the definition under 163-3184 1A defines an affected person in pertinent part as owners of real property abutting real property subject to a proposed change to the future land use map. And today we're submitting oral and written objections to the application being considered today. And the association qualifies because they are within the 500-foot radius for public notice today and are immediately adjacent. In particular, the 2 tracks that the association operates and controls are for common area roads and green space for the benefit of their 790 members. In addition, 97 individual members of the association are independently own real property within the notice radius, including 2 sub-associations, that's Dove Hollow and Dove's Nest condo associations, who independently operate common element property on behalf of their individual members. The proposed amendment, if adopted, provides significant incompatible density, not necessarily as described by staff and the applicant, but also in conjunction with the Live Local Act, which would allow upwards of 22 dwelling units per acre for qualifying projects. And the proposal is to develop not only on the uplands in the coastal high hazard, but also an approximate 4.26 acres of wetlands. And the Live Local Act opportunities for administrative entitlements is alluded to in the applicant's original application from May 2025. I wanted to alert you to that. And then through the insufficiency process, it was stricken. So the original traffic study was for mid-rise residential and alluded to upwards of moving from 14 under suburban to 22 dwelling units per acre potentially under the Live Local Act, which is entirely administrative and preempted by state law. So accordingly, the association and its members stand to be injured to a degree far greater than the public at large, given the qualification for their substantiating their status as an affected person. Now, just preliminarily as to procedural due process as well, we're here today under Administrative Code AC 13-6, and that provides within 15 working days of the application being found sufficient, the counties to send a notice to all owners within that notice radius. The application was found sufficient on December 8th, but it doesn't appear that that sufficiency notice was actually transmitted. Further, at least 15 calendar days before the LPA hearing, which for the case today would be January 29th, a sign was to be supplied by the county and posted on the subject properties. And the applicants to make a good faith effort to maintain that signage up through until after the BOCC's adoption on the application. We perform site visits on the 18th, the 20th, and the 22nd, and there is no such sign posted. And we have photographs in Mr. Forgey's report that's in your package reflecting that as well. And it's important to also note in your package, if the public were going to independently verify the scheduling of today's hearing and the status of the application through the county's Excella system, as of Friday the 20th, the application was noted by county staff as both being insufficient and sufficient on the same day, December 8th, and that the LPA hearing notice is still said to be due as of December 8th and is marked as TBD. So absent the proper noticing, the public would be at a deficit independently confirming the status of the application and when it would be heard by the LPA today. And even out in the lobby here, it notes that the meeting today is the Lee County Commission Planning Workshop. So not necessarily the LPA, further confusing things. And given the lack of detail in Excella, I had emailed Mr. Dunn on February 12th to inquire as to the status of the case and when it would be brought to the LPA, and I was advised that staff was planning to bring it to the LPA on the 23rd, and the staff report was still being finalized. But again, the admin code required the county to produce the sign for posting and for it to actually be posted on or before January 29th. So I don't know how that timing could have possibly worked if it was still only being planned to be heard today, the 23rd. So for these reasons alone, it's our position the case shouldn't even be substantively heard today, and the deficiencies in the required notice should be cured. Notwithstanding the failures of the noticing today, if the LPA still wishes to proceed substantively, we ask that the LPA recommend that the amendment not be transmitted for all the reasons that Mr. Forgey will elaborate on and which are also in his report. In particular, the map amendment needs to consider the ceiling, the maximum development potential, if it's adopted, and the nexus between the proposed map amendment and the available administrative entitlements under the Live Local Act cannot be discounted. That density is incompatible with the existing neighborhoods, presents transportation access and hurricane evacuation impacts in the already vulnerable coastal high hazard, as well as wetlands impacts. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Forgey. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. My name is Max Forgey, doing business as Forgey Planning, LLC, 236 Southeast 45th Street, Cape Coral. I am a 33-year member in good standing of the American Institute of Certified Planners and hold a master's degree in urban and regional planning from Indiana University, Bloomington. My resume and my report are on file. You have them. In the brief time that I have, I want to respectfully remind you that this is a legislative case. You are under no obligation to transmit it to the Board of County Commissioners with a recommendation of approval, and you have every good reason to deny it. I would like to address the live local context at length, but I don't have time to address it at length, so I will say that the Live Local Act takes away the Board of County Commissioners' long-range opportunity to make decisions about land use once they have received amendments to the comprehensive plan. My concern goes well beyond the immediate impact of the applicant's request, and you should also consider the irreversible impact which might result from any subsequent quasi-judicial change sought by the previous owner. You heard from their attorney. They don't really have a plan for what's going on. They are asking you, I would call it, to accept a pig in a poke and making a black box decision, not sure what comes next. When comparing the existing maximum suburban density outcome of 185 units maximum versus urban community, which is 290, that is a dramatic increase in density and intensity. Along a constrained regional corridor, and I have provided, by approving a flume amendment on the subject properties, the Board of County Commissioners would swing the door wide open to an irreversible 40% jump in entitlement density, which could not be regulated by the historically available regulatory tools used by local governments in their permitting process. I urge you to recommend denial.
Thank you, Mr. Forgy. I'm Scott. Scott, if you just a moment, please. Would staff like to respond to the Live Local shading that the two first public speakers have referenced?
However, the chair would like, if you would like us to respond to that now, we can, or we can wait till the end and respond to them all together.
We can do it collectively. Mr. Razor? Yes, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Scott Razor. I'm the president of the Forest Property Owners Association, also known as the FPOA. I live about 150 yards from the back of Dove's Nest. Dove's Nest is probably 100 yards from the subject property. Some of my golfing and many of my people here would question whether I can estimate yardage correctly or not, but it's a good guess. At the direction of the FPOA board, we opposed this rezoning of the property from suburban to urban. We enjoy a relatively quiet and natural preserved living in the forest. There are 650 acres in our community. There are 790 doors. The proposed plan would be 290 doors and less than 13 acres. We have a lot of concerns. A lot of them may have to do with planning, but naturally as residents, we have those concerns. A failure to plan is a plan to fail, and I think this is a big problem. The roadways, interesting thoughts on what they're going to do with the roadways. At Forest Boulevard, which is adjacent to Timber Lakes, just south of the development, it is impossible to turn left out of our development now. And most days, it's impossible to turn left into the development. This requires a lot more study before something is zoned to be able to have this type of capacity and density. Noise pollution. Not only the ambient noise of this many people with this many cars and this many engines will affect it. I wonder what the car alarms going off will sound like to the residents of Doves Hollow, Doves Nest, and probably myself. I'm not that far away. Water, we are in a floodplain. We spend a lot of time and money maintaining our section of the canal and drainage. There's a North Canal, South Canal maintained by the county. We maintain the Central Canal. We spent over $100,000 last year in upgrades and maintenance to the canal. This is to get the water out once it gets in. Subject to whatever God wants, the water is going to come in. And in fact, through my yard, through Dove's Nest, and into the subject property, over 30 inches passed through during Ian. I don't mean to be overly protective about our community. We welcome good neighbors, and in fact, many businesses and residential neighbors we happily coexist with. The Forest and the Forest Country Club have continued to be supporters of the area and be good neighbors to our community. Do I stop?
You can just wrap up.
I'm almost there. We have raised millions of dollars for Golisano Children's Hospital, along with other charitable contributions such as Hope Hospice and the Angel Tree at Christmas. During season, we do blood drives inside the forest. We really question whether this is a good decision to have this type of density on our property, and hope you choose not to allow this to go through and rezone. Thank you very much for your time and your service.
Thank you, Mr. Razor. Next at the podium is Robert Verdonk, and on deck would be Greg Horn.
Mr. Chairman, I'll pass because he knows already the density is already determined.
And you are Mr. Verdonk? Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Horn, or Greg Horn? And on deck will be Fred Leopard.
Good morning. My name is Greg Horn. I'm a resident of the Forest and have been since 2008, and a Lee County resident, full-time Florida resident. I was a city manager for 40 years in my previous life and still have a small consulting firm in Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana area. And so I'm very used to dealing with these kinds of environments, except many times I'm sitting where you are, where your staff is. I took the opportunity this weekend to review the packet. I think the council and the subject matter expert that have been retained by the Forest Property Owners Association have hit all the poignant comments, quite frankly, that I felt needed to be addressed. I think it is a black box. I would urge you to either turn this down or not to take action today. The density situation has been mentioned many times in the petitioner's materials. I don't want to say that they're disingenuous, but we have an opportunity here to see the density fourfold of what it's previously or currently permitted. A lot of emphasis has been played upon what's across the street, and if this is compatible with what's across the street. I would subject to you that State Route 41 across the street is quite frankly a different world, and it's 150, probably 200-foot right-of-way. Staff can fill you in on that. So what's across the street, in my mind, is irrelevant to what is on the west side of the street. I think the current plan amendment being suburban is appropriate. Wayne Wiles is a typical example of a commercial enterprise with a fairly low profile, which has allowed the rear vegetation to remain. They're not a heavy traffic user. Their hours are somewhat limited. They fit very well there. There's plenty of opportunities for other types of commercial development in that area under the current suburban category. I think going to urban truly is the black box that was mentioned, and that's what we're opening up here. So I would urge you to either oppose this or to not take any action. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and your time today. Mr. Leopard is at the podium. Mr. Leopard? Thank you for attending today. Next at the podium will be Paul Ben Susan, thank you. And on deck is Joe Duffy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm a 23-year resident full-time of the Forest Country Club. I am Vice President of the Forest Property Owners Association and a concerned resident. I recognize the fact that this property will be developed in some way at some time. The reason I'm speaking to you today is that I feel that this particular proposal is the black box and is potentially adversely, is an adverse effect on all of the surrounding community. It is not in the best interest of the Forest Property Owners Association or the neighbors to allow this to go through. And I thank you for your consideration and thank you for your time.
Thank you. We thank you for yours as well. Joe Duffy?
Yes, I'll cast on comments, and I agree with our forest representative.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. And the last card that I have is Mark Rymant. And while he's ascending, is there anyone else that would like to speak today that hasn't filled out a card? It's not too late if you would like to do that. Thank you.
Good morning, Mark Rymant, 16448 Timber Lakes Drive, and that's in the Dove Hollow community within the forest. I've been coming down to Southwest Florida for over 30 years, and this is a family house within Dove Hollow, and I go back to the days when Route 41 was being torn up, raised, and widened. I don't know if anybody recalls that, but it's 30 years ago, and I just wonder, are we on the verge of that having to be done again? When you pull out of the Forest Country Club to make a left on 41, you truly are taking your life into your hands. I really mean that. You truly are, because you're perched in the middle of the street, and you've got to wait for traffic coming from the north, and you've got to wait for an opening on the south. How much more can we put there? You know, I've heard words such as intensive usage. How intense are we going to get? Cars is the issue. You know, as I was driving here, I was going 65 miles an hour as I pulled out of the Forest Country Club, and I had cars flying by me that had to have been going 75, 80. So I just wonder about the rules that are currently in place. They're in place for a reason. The people who laid out the community said, hey, this is going to be the suburban development maximum. This is as high as we're going to go. Dove Hollow was built and the forest was built with those rules in mind. We were built based on suburban rules. We have 6 units per acre. And this parcel is directly next to the forest and to Dove Hollow. In my opinion, it should be looked at as an inclusion of Dove Hollow, again, so that it fits. 5.1.5, the integrity of the environment. That's what we're talking about here, the integrity of the environment. I agree with Joe. This will be developed. But let's be smart. Let's be smart with the development. The people prior to us put these rules in place so that we didn't have to risk our lives as we're entering 41. We know it's going to be developed. And the fact that the developer doesn't know what they're going to put there, are they simply just trying to get this widened so that they can flip it and make money? I mean, we've got to be smart with just how intense this gets. So I'm just going to leave with, just one final thought. It simply doesn't fit. And I would ask that you guys decline this application. Thank you.
Thank you. We have our final card is Terry DeFord.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm a property owner in Dove's Nest, which is the community just to the west of this whole development. I've heard a bunch of talk here. The property owner's attorney got up, I believe it's his attorney, and he conveniently limited the density to 10 units per acre. If you read the application, that is totally false. They based all their studies on 22 units per acre using the Live Local Act, which is drastically different than what we have in the forest right now, which is limited to 6 units per acre. They conveniently talked about the east side of 41, which is commercial development. They forgot to talk about the west side, which is non-commercial development. And that's where they're asking for the zoning to be changed. I agree with a lot of the people up here. I think it's a black box. I would appreciate you turning down this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeFord. That concludes the section of today's meeting for public comment on this agenda item. Before we proceed, I just want to let those of you that have taken the time today to come, you are a material part of this process. Your remarks have been heard. We have a public section because it's important that you showed up today. It's an important part that you shared your thoughts and your comments. So we want to thank you for taking the time out of your day today. I know it's an awkward on a Monday at 9 o'clock, but we want you to know that we thank you for being here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So Kate Burgess, for the record, principal planner with the planning section in Lee County. There were a number of concerns that were brought up, and I believe we wanted to have the county address them after all of them were brought up. So I'm going to address a couple things before I address the Live Local stuff. Someone brought up flooding as a potential problem. The flood zone on this property is AE11, so regardless of what the development ends up being, they'll have to design for that, they'll have to meet the elevation, they'll have to do all of the stormwater requirements. That'll be at the time of DO, so it's not something that we would get at the future land use stage, nor does the future land use impact that. The other thing that was brought up was uses. So the major difference between urban community, which is the future land use category that they're requesting, versus suburban is that urban community allows light industrial, but it only allows light industrial through a planned development process. Right now, the C1 zoning is already in place. It allows for a lot of commercial uses, anything from a shopping center to a car lot to a grocery store to multifamily. All of those are allowed uses now on the property as it currently exists. So then, and I've brought up the zoning map. This is the existing zoning map of this area. So you'll see that there is commercial, that's all of the red on both sides of the street, along with industrial, that's in the purple, on the east side of 41. Some of the uses in the commercial areas are car sales centers or flooring centers, so sort of something that is on the border of commercial and industrial uses. So they classify under the C1 zoning district. From a broader perspective, they're almost a light industrial use, and those are around the subject property. So then that brings us back to the Live Local question. Live Local could be used on this property now, and it's not something that we have any control over, regardless of what the future land use is, whether it's suburban or urban community that can be used. The county has allowed in our urban areas to do up to the 22 units an acre just in the urban future land use categories. I think there's 3 of them. Basically to incentivize affordable housing in places that already have existing utilities and infrastructure. So public transit and water and sewer and commercial and all of the amenities that you would expect to be around a multifamily development. So with that being said, we have not received an application for a Live Local project. We have not had a pre-application for a Live Local project. The applicant in their first submittal did state that in their application materials, but has since withdrawn all of that from the application materials. So their development plan is totally up to them. They were required to do an analysis of the worst case scenario as far as water, sewer, traffic, all of that. And we did not find any insufficiencies there. So I think that addresses most of what was brought up. If you have any additional questions, I'm happy to answer them.
We do. Mr. Zuba? Ms. Schoenberg?
Curious, about the accusation about the signs, no signage in the advertising. Can you address that, please?
I believe we gave signs. I don't know whether we got pictures of them posted, but the applicant can address that.
Yeah, as far as the signage, our staff, excuse me, our staff did post signs, and we typically take pictures of those signs and send them to the county to verify that we did do that.
Anything else?
I guess I'm a little confused on why this request has come about and what the client is looking for in this application. If you're given the C1 uses and all that comes with that, you're allowed residential, you're allowed to do the Live Local Act under either situations. What is the benefit of going through this? I guess I'm missing that point of this application.
Yeah, so let me answer. The short answer to your question is, I think they're looking to increase the value and increase what the opportunities might be. There might be the possibility of light industrial at some time if somebody wanted to do that, although they don't have a user that would want to do that. More intense commercial. There would be a little bit of additional residential if you did site build affordable. There's the Live Local discussion. So the reality is that from my discussions with the client, they don't exactly know. In fact, they don't really know at all. They're looking at commercial right now. But they want to increase the marketability of the project and the area where it's located, and they believe if we're just looking at the plan amendment, which is what this exercise is, that it is appropriate in this location. And I feel it's very important to address this Live Local question because I understand the public's concern over this. Here's what happened. Okay, what happened is approximately 2 to 3 years ago at least, and I'll say that Russell Schropp was still involved at that time, so it's been a while ago. The owner of the property, which is the same owner now, said, hey, there's this new Live Local Act, and there was some discussion with the county about that. There was an application filed for a plan amendment back at that time, and that application included references to that. That application was withdrawn and never came to you, right? And then a couple years later, we had more discussions about, well, we don't know what we want to do. What can we do with this property that would increase the value, maybe give us some other options, because we're having trouble finding an end user. And so what happened is we came back in for this plan amendment, urban community. The very first submittal, talking to the folks at Quattrone, they had done the original application, which had some references to Live Local. And I think the first submittal still had been some copy and paste, and there was still some reference to that. Now, I can't stand here before you today and tell you that there's no chance that will ever happen on this property. I don't have any control over that. I can tell you that all that's been removed. There has been no application to do any Live Local. There's been no pre-application, as Katie just said, because at the end of the day, that's not what the plan is at this moment in time. Is that a possibility? I suppose it is. It's a possibility whether they do the plan amendment or they don't. It might change the density a little bit. But at the end of the day, that's not the purpose of the plan amendment. And I understand that you can't rely on me saying that any more than I can rely on my client saying that. But I want to remind everybody that what we're really here to talk about is that we have an analysis of a plan amendment from suburban to urban community. And is it consistent with the plan? Is it compatible with the surrounding uses? That's the question, right? And I don't have an end use for you. Many times we do. We have a companion PD that I can come in here and I can say, here's what's going to go here, and analyze it with that context in mind, which the statutes and the law allow you to do. I don't have that today. It's very possible that it will never get rezoned, that they would use the C1 zoning. But I will tell you that the thrust, Mr. Scrutenboer, is my client is looking at it, is to increase the possibilities on the property, to make it more marketable, to try to get something done, because they haven't been able to get an end user on this property, and they're looking to do that. So that's the reality. The other thing that I want to go back to, and I don't know, there was a question earlier from Mr. Stouter about policy 5.1.5, and I'm trying to find that policy so I can also reference it when I answer the question, because I've had this come up now a number of times in other projects, and we talked about it in this project. But policy 5.1.5 talks about protecting existing residential uses from incompatible other uses, okay? And that's important. That's the preamble to it, right? Residential uses, all right? And so to the extent that there's a concern about an incompatibility with a multifamily use coming in, it's not an issue. It's also a residential use, right? So it's a residential use, and we've been through this multiple times. You're protecting the residential uses from other non-compatible uses. So residential is always compatible with residential is the general thought under the plan policy, all right? To the extent there's a concern over a commercial use or something else that comes through, well, it's already zoned C1. The Land Development Code has within it standard buffering that is required in a conventional zoning district for C1. What the buffer that's required is based on what's adjacent to you, right? So if you have certain adjacent uses, you have different buffers than if you have, say, a roadway or an easement, for example. So it already has that inherently in the code, and the code follows the comprehensive plan in order to ensure consistency and compatibility. So I do understand the public's concern over, compatibility. Those are always things, you get a piece of property that's vacant and somebody's going to develop it, and it's always a question about what's going to be there. But that's what the existing code requirements as far as buffers, if you go with the standard C1, which is there now. If we go to some other zoning, right, most likely it would be some sort of a planned development rezoning. Well, that has to be analyzed at that time. And frankly, many of the residents' concerns are concerns that would have to be addressed at the time of a rezoning should it come there. I also understand it's possible that never happens, and so that's why they're here in part to raise their concerns today. But any of them, again, to the extent, and I didn't hear a lot of concern over the IL, the fact that you're allowed to have light industrial uses. But again, I want to emphasize that if that was something that was ultimately sought as development on this property, must be done, I think, at this point in time through a PD's rezoning, which would have to look at, is that compatible? And not only that, what are the buffers? What are the other screening requirements, things that are required? Again, no indication at this moment in time that that's what it would be, although it does increase that possibility. Finally, I want to say it was the second to last gentleman who came up. He was wearing a black sweater, and he said a couple things that I thought were interesting points, right? One of the things he said was, look, we've got 41, and he remembered when 41 was widened and this and that and the other, and then he asked sort of a hypothetical question, is that where we are again? And the answer is, if you look at all the traffic studies, yeah, that's where we are again, whether we do this or we don't do this. The reality is we've had a lot of development in Southwest Florida in the last few years, and the roadways need improvements at intersections. They need improvements in widening, turn lanes, all of those types of things. But that's with or without this 13-acre change to urban community. It doesn't really matter. And so the analysis of what the traffic impacts and what the roadway impacts will be on this project are all development order and zoning. They'll be done at that time, although we did do a traffic study, again, assuming the most intense use, right? Worst case scenario, and also the facilities and all those types of things. So at the end of the day, I do understand those concerns. I think we all feel the pain of that. But coming back to the main question, is urban community, future land use, a compatible and consistent land use in this location with frontage on a major arterial road, with all of the urban services in place, with bus stops within walking distance, with other urban community, all commercial uses, and mix of commercial, light industrial, all in the area? Staff has concluded that it is. We believe that it is based on our application. Staff report concluded not only that it was an appropriate use, but that the urban community future land use is more consistent with the current makeup of this area than the suburban future land use. We believe that that's what the competent and substantial evidence that's in the application file and that you've heard today supports.
Thank you, Mr. Aiken. If staff would like to take the podium, Dawn, do you have questions?
Yeah. Should the applicant decide to rezone to an industrial plan development, what type of opportunities will the public be afforded to speak their mind, for suggestions towards the uses allowed in this industrial development?
So if the applicant were to decide to rezone to anything, it would have to go through a public hearing process, whether it's a industrial plan development, another plan development, or another conventional rezone. So it would, the way that the rezones work in the county is that they go through the hearing examiner. So the public would be, they would get notified. Everyone, I think within a 500-foot radius gets notified via mail whenever something goes to public hearing. So they would get notified of the hearing examiner meeting, and then they could speak at that meeting. It would then, assuming it's a plan development, go to the Board of County Commissioners, which they would also be able to speak at that meeting.
Thank you.
I have a question that might be for a county attorney. The sign posting or lack of sign posting is concerning. Usually there's an affidavit that the sign was posted. Before it goes to BOCC, I think that should be figured out for sure. But are signs required? I know some of our notices we do just on the kindness of our heart, and some of them are required. Is a sign required?
So the courtesy posting is exactly that, a courtesy notice, and the administrative code makes it clear that as long as Chapter 125 notice requirements, which is generally publication in a newspaper of general circulation, as long as the 125 notice requirements are met, notice is considered sufficient to conduct this hearing.
And letters were sent out in addition.
I believe the courtesy notices were sent out per usual, and I will say, I mean, it's pretty clear that there was actual notice based on, the retaining an expert and preparing a report, and based on email communication. So it does seem that there was actual notice as well. Mm-hmm.
That's all I have.
My question pertains to live local density.
Okay.
What is that density under C1? What is that density under the current suburban land use? And what is that density under urban?
So, Live Local is a state statute,
Sure.
And it's preemption over local government regulations or density allowances. So under Live Local, we are required to allow the highest standard density in all places, all commercial, industrial, plan development, zoning districts. So the highest standard density that the county has is 14 units an acre. The county, in all of the urban districts, already allows for bonus density for affordable housing. So in order to incentivize Live Local in the urban areas as opposed to a suburban, an outlying suburban, a rural, something else that is farther away from centralized utilities or farther away from development generally, we have been allowing essentially bonus density for affordable housing in the urban districts at a maximum density of 22 units an acre.
And in the suburban, it would be?
In the suburban, it would be 14.
And in the C1, it would be?
So C1 across the board has zero impact other than the fact that it's commercial zone, which makes it eligible for Live Local.
So as it now is vested as suburban, it is 14 if they went Live Local, which there's a possibility, but there's no plan in place or that has been
Correct.
posited, versus 22 if it's urban.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, any other questions from the EPA? The public has closed. The public section is closed. If you have other comments that you wish to speak to, Ms. Berkey, you may do that outside of the confines of this meeting right now. Anybody else? Okay. Well, with that then, I will leave the county attorney to address the flurry of things that Ms. Berkey has foisted. It is our obligation to render a decision, and therefore I open the floor for discussion and or a motion between the LPA.
I'll start a little discussion. It looks to me that this comes down to the difference between what is proposed and what exists now is whether or not light industrial would be allowed, which would only be allowed in the plan development process, and the live local going from 14 units per acre to potentially up to 22 units an acre, which equates to 105 units. So it's a difference of a max of 290 units versus a max of 185 units. I understand the concerns. This is a change coming to your area, but looking at the existing site features, where there's a large borrow pit abutting the forest community, followed by a fence, landscaping, followed by a road, followed by parking, then residential units. I think it's a rare instance where the existing features create a good degree of separation between the proposed uses and existing uses just naturally as it functions. I do believe that the intent of the Live Local was for to bring in affordable housing, which we need, and near where services are, where you can get on the bus, where you can ride your bike. So I think Live Local is an appropriate location along 41. I think 41 is a major arterial road, and it is urban now, I think that there's maybe some concerns that with noticing. It might have been beneficial for the applicant to perhaps meet with the residents of Forest beforehand, but this is where we are today. And in my opinion, this is an urban corridor, and the future land use as proposed is consistent.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Dawn, any embellishments?
I agree with Jennifer. We have to compare this to the LEAP plan. I found it consistent with the urban community future land use designation, and I also agree that it is a place that Live Local applies to, that should apply to. So.
Okay. Don?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank the public for coming out and speaking today. This is a very important, integral part of this process. So thank you very much and appreciate your comments. While we all may have personal feelings whether this application is appropriate or not for this particular area, we have to set that aside as the LPA members and look at it as in terms of compatibility to the LEAP plan. And I have found nothing today presented or in the application that would provide for any inconsistencies in that. And so therefore, despite some personal issues with it, I would support the motion.
Thank you. Mr. Zuba?
Dawn and Don both raised issues. And beside that, the future land use of the project is really going to be reviewed again and again when the final application and zoning comes through, so that this is not the definitive land use decision. It's really the consistency of the plan as you have stated. I would support it.
As is often the case, it is easy, very easy to let zoning blend into comp plan discussions. And when you do that, we're outside of our purview. Our purview is, as stated, it is to see if it's complicit with the future land use edicts. And to Hank's point, there's going to be a lot more bites of the apple here before there's anything that goes vertical. And I concur with the rest of you on the LPA. I cannot find in the application and my 5.1.5 anything in the application that would prohibit me from finding this to be complicit and to move to adopt. To Mr. Aiken's comment about residential to residential, not to be flippant, but the existing residential in the forest versus 22 units per acre on this adjoining property is like regular M&Ms to peanut M&Ms. They're both M&Ms, but they taste very different. So I would encourage those of you that are here that you maintain a vigilance should the applicant proceed in any kind of a zoning action, because they're both M&Ms, but they're very different. So you'll have another look at this at that point. So with that, I'm looking now for a motion and a second.
Okay, I would move approval of the CPA 2025-0003
To adopt?
to adopt.
Thank you, Hank. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And before we stir, given the volume of people and the transition in the hour, we're going to take a 10-minute recess. So we'll be back in 10. Okay, we are going to reconvene. It has been 10 minutes. Our next agenda item is agenda item 5B. 5B is CPA 2025-00012, amenity improvement, text amendment. Amend Goal 13 and associated objectives and policies to allow for golf course and ancillary uses in the mixed-use plan development zoning district, subject to settlement agreement, case number 22CA-002743, approved under section 70.001 Florida statutes. The applicant, please.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
I need to recuse myself from this, this agenda item, and I have filed my paperwork.
Thank you. May the record reflect same, Janet. Thank you. Stacy.
Good morning. My name is Stacy Hewitt. I'm the planning director with RBI Planning and Landscape Architecture, representing the applicant. The applicant is CAM7 Sub LLC, and the project team is also here with us. And we've got Neil Montgomery with Pavese Law Firm, as well as Brandon Frey with J.R. Evans Engineering, and David Brown with Respect, and Shane Johnson with Passarella and Associates. The request before you is to amend Goal 13 and the associated objectives and policies to allow for golf courses and ancillary uses in the mixed-use plan development zoning district, subject to settlement agreement case number 22CA-002743 that was approved under section 70.001 Florida statutes. I'd like to go through a timeline of how we've come to today. In 1990, the county stipulated settlement agreement with the Department of Community Affairs established the density reduction groundwater resource area in the comprehensive plan. And that was to protect the water resources in the area. And at that time, there were no states that accomplished those goals. And over time, now there have been state changes that protect the water resources and removed that from the county's jurisdiction. But that was in 1990. Then in November 22nd, 1999, Goal 13 was established, and it established criteria for the development of private recreation facilities within the density reduction groundwater resources area. And it established specific criteria, and it precluded residential development. On August 5th of 2015, policy 33.3.4 was adopted, which created the Environmental Enhancement and Preservation Communities Overlay, also referred to as the EPCO. This was reviewed and evaluated at the DRGR and implemented criteria, more current criteria established, and also included residential development. In November 6 of 2019, the subject property had an industrial plan development zoning for a mine denied on it. On June 22nd of 2022, a stipulation of settlement pursuant to section 70.0014, the property development or private property rights, established by the staff, the hearing examiner, the Board of County Commissioners, and the court all reviewed the subject property and all the development reports and found it consistent with the most recent review criteria in the DRGR, which was the EPCO criteria. And they found it consistent with the intent of that, providing significant environmental and hydrological improvements, which created the Kingston development. The current request is to amend Goal 13, and it's required to facilitate any request for golf courses and ancillary uses within the mixed-use plan development. And it will comply with the established criteria that does provide the significant environmental and hydrological improvements that are required in the EPCO and have been found consistent. And the request is not changing any of that criteria. It is just clarifying an inconsistency between Goal 13 and Chapter 13 as been outlined in the staff report. Before you is an image showing the subject property over on the east. It is south of State Road 82, approximately 1 mile from the Hendry County line, and extends south towards Collier County. There are multiple residential neighborhoods within the established development pods, and it is essential to offer a variety of non-competing amenities and housing options for the Kingston development to be successful, which also allows for more internal capture and reduced trips from leaving Kingston for off-site uses. This internal capture is essential for keeping the development successful. And the schedule of uses already includes recreational facilities, personal or private on-site, which also includes golf courses under there. And the request does not change the uses or the allowances within the mixed-use plan development. The conditions of approval require a minimum of 3,287 acres of created, restored, and/or enhanced areas to be dedicated in conservation and flowway easements. It's important to note that the DRGR has several overlays that require or incentivize improvements to the existing condition of the properties, as evidenced by some of the preserves that are purchased and enhanced by tax dollars, and private developers when there's incentives built into the code to allow the development that requires the developer to do all of this without tax dollars. So all of this acreage is being restored at the developer's expense, which is going to bring forward improvements to the DRGR that wouldn't otherwise be able to be accomplished. The request does not change any of the required dedicated conservation area. The conditions of the mixed-use plan development approval provide adequate protection measures, and they were found to protect the public interest. And the request does not change or reduce any of the conditions of the mixed-use plan development approval. There are several conditions within the MPD, and I just wanted to highlight a few of those. It does require the hydrological restoration plan at the development order stage. It requires surface water monitoring and an enhanced lake management plan, connection to water and sewer, reduction in the water withdrawal from the aquifer, a reduction in the total nitrogen and total phosphorus, and it requires reestablishment of historic surface water flows through the property. Off-site, and it also requires an off-site hydraulic connection to help alleviate flooding of properties to the east. Some additional environmental conditions that are included are the requirement for the 3,287 acres of created, restored, and/or enhanced areas to be dedicated in conservation and flowway easements. It requires wildlife crossings, a protected species management and human-wildlife coexistence plan, wildlife fencing, indigenous preservation, restoration and management plan, limited wetland impacts, and a restoration phasing plan, all of which have been provided in the attachments to the packet this morning. The request is consistent with the Lee Plan pursuant to Chapter 13A1D, the administration portion, development authorized by court order resulting from litigation in which the Lee County was a party is found consistent with the Lee Plan, and the amendment reconciles the inconsistencies between Chapter 13 and Goal 13, which we're requesting to amend. The request is consistent with policy 1.4.5 as it was found consistent with the EPCO standards by staff, the hearing examiner, the Board of County Commissioners, and the court. It's also consistent with policy 17.3.2 through 17.3.4 on public input. We did hold a publicly advertised information meeting on November 19th of 2025, and we did not receive any feedback from that meeting. It's consistent with Goal 13, the private recreational facilities in the DRGR, as the mixed-use plan development has already been reviewed and found consistent with those requirements. And the proposed amendments are appropriate. It's also consistent with policy 33.1.2 through 33.1.3 on water, habitat, and other natural resources. The priority restoration strategy overlay already identifies areas specifically identified that may qualify for the unique development incentives, including the EPCO, due to the potential for natural resource benefits and/or wildlife connections, and the subject property does both. It's also consistent with policy 33.1.7, integrated surface and groundwater model, which will be required by it is required by the MPD conditions. Lee County staff report recommends transmittal, and the applicant is in agreement with the staff report, and the amendments are consistent with and in furtherance of the intent of the Lee plan. And in conclusion, we respectfully request recommendation of transmittal, and our team is available for any questions.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you. Hank, you good?
Stacy, yes. Ask you a question. Probably my own dense understanding of the proposed amendment, but on page 10 of 11, the settlement agreement description says, the proposed amendment would not permit any golf courses that exceed golf course threshold, even though the amendment technically exempts Kingston MPD. Could you tell me how those 2 points are consistent?
Yes. The request is, I believe the statement is in the staff report findings about the number of golf holes in the MPD, or in the DRGR. And there are only 2 others that have been approved, and there's only 1 proposed in the Kingston development. And so the finding is that it's not, by this request, it's not increasing any limit because it's already capped within the MPD itself. So
in your opinion, there's no inconsistency between the DRGR recommendations or limitations on golf course with this amendment?
no, because of the PRFPD requirements were done quite a long time ago, and there was only 2 that have come forward since then, and there's only 1 proposed with this development, so it's found, that's why staff found it consistent that we would not be exceeding that threshold.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Good morning again. Kate Burgess, Principal Planner with Lee County's Planning Section. So this next case is a privately initiated text amendment, CPA 2025-00012, known as the Amenity Improvement Amendment. So the applicant is requesting to amend Goal 13 of the Lee Plan to allow a golf course as a residential amenity in the area described in the settlement agreement case 22-CA-002743. So the text amendments are reconciling the disparity between the requirements of Lee Plan Goal 13, Lee Plan Chapter 13, and the property's zoning designation set forth in the settlement agreement. This amendment only applies to the Kingston development and does not change any of their allowed uses. So the property on the slide shows the extent of the Kingston development. It's approximately 7 miles north to south from State Road 82 to the Collier County boundary and comprises many parcels of land. It's surrounded by large lot subdivisions, Lehigh Acres, preserves within both Lee and Collier counties. So before I get into all of the applicant's proposed amendments, I'm going to provide a little bit of background information, which the applicant has already provided a little bit of too, so there'll be a little bit of overlap. In 2019, the Board of County Commissioners denied DCI 2011-0007, which sought to rezone the subject property to industrial plan development to support a new mine. After the denial, the applicant entered into a court-ordered settlement agreement with the county that ultimately led to the creation of the Kingston development, which was to be treated as a MPD. That's per the settlement agreement. The settlement agreement allows a variety of uses, including residential uses, their amenities, and their ancillary uses. The settlement agreement is deemed consistent with the Lee Plan through Chapter 13. Chapter 13 in the Lee Plan is the administration section, so it tells us how we interpret things that are within the Lee Plan. So under Chapter 13, the settlement agreement is consistent with the Lee Plan because it was a court order and the county was party to that court order. So the developer wants to include a golf course as a residential amenity. Kingston has DRGR future land use, which only allows golf courses through a PRFPD, so that's a private recreational facilities plan development, under Goal 13 of the Lee Plan. But Kingston is court ordered to be treated as an MPD. So there's this disparity there. So to remedy this inconsistency, the applicant has requested to exempt the Kingston development from Goal 13. So the applicant has requested to amend 2 existing Lee Plan policies and to add 7 new policies to Goal 13. So in this presentation, these have been split between this slide and the next slide. The proposed amendments to policies 13.1.2 and 13.2.1 are shown on the slide. These 2 policies relate to Map 1F, which shows the private recreational facilities overlay, and the zoning requirement to have the PRFPD. The proposed amendments add an exemption to those policies for golf courses and ancillary uses in the planned use or the mixed use plan development associated with the Kingston settlement agreement. This slide includes all 7 new policies that the applicant is proposing. Each of these policies relates to a specific topic within Goal 13. The new policies exempt the golf course amenities within Kingston MPD from the requirements of each objective's topics, which are the PRFPD zoning requirement, the general development standards for the PRFPD, protection of water quality, quantity, and surface water resources, protection of wildlife, protection of natural resources, water monitoring, and golf course performance standards. So now we're going to discuss how the proposed amendments are consistent with the Lee Plan. The staff report went into these in detail, so I'm not going to reiterate all of that in this presentation. But the applicant has added language to Goal 13 to exempt the golf course amenities within the Kingston development from the Goal 13 requirements. However, all of the development within the development area of Kingston must meet the requirements of the settlement agreement, which already includes all of these, the general development standards, the water quality, the quantity, the monitoring, all of those things. So staff has found that the proposal is consistent with all of the objectives and all of the policies within Goal 13. The proposed amendments would only impact the Kingston development, which is within the DRGR and wetlands future land use categories. Under the settlement agreement, the Kingston development, including its amenities, have been found consistent with both of the existing future land use categories. The proposed amendments do not change any of the allowed uses within the development, so the proposed text amendments are not inconsistent with the existing future land use categories. And then Lee Plan Goal 33 describes the Southeast Lee Community Plan area. The applicant is not proposing any changes to policies or objectives within Goal 33. The settlement agreement, and by extension the MPD, has been found consistent with the objectives and policies within Goal 33. The proposed amendments do not change the allowances or requirements in the MPD associated with the settlement agreement, including all of the water quality, wildlife habitat, so on and so forth, that are within that agreement. So staff found that the proposed text amendments are also not inconsistent with Goal 33. Based on the analysis included in the staff report in this presentation, staff recommends approval. I'm here for any questions if you have any.
Questions for staff? Dawn?
Due to the uniqueness of the settlement agreement, I just wanted to confirm no other MPDs in the DRGR would able to use this as precedence as a result.
No, all of the proposed amendments specifically address the settlement agreement case number.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Nothing would prevent another golf course coming forward through the DRGR, through the private recreational plan development under this?
No, they could still apply for a PRFPD to be able to develop as a golf course.
Yep.
Okay.
Kudos. Nice job on the application and the analysis. It's a very complicated one, and having to deal with a client like Mr. Blacksmith had to be a real challenge for you, and you've done a good job. Thank you.
She made me, I was told after 36 years that I don't need to make a presentation, so this is the first one we've done, I'm not making a presentation, but I'm a bad man. But I just want to show you, it made me nervous when you said that we're exempt from all these policies.
I heard the whispers.
This is the only Bible, the settlement agreement. Everything that we were exempt from in that case is all covered through the existing lawsuit settlement. And that's all I have.
I told you he was hard to deal with.
I have no further questions, Kate. It does feel kind of lonely without you filling that space. It's good to see you. All right. Any discussion from LPA before we make a motion? There's nobody from public here. Nobody's giving me a card. So, all right. We have a motion.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to recommend approval of CPA 2025-0012 as written.
And would you amend that to say recommend transmit?
Recommended transmit, yes.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a second. Any further discussion?
I just commend the applicant for following all of the regulations that govern the private recreational plan development in terms of wildlife and water quality monitoring and adhering to that. So that's important, and I applaud them for doing that.
When I was prepping for this was a very circuitous and interesting narrative, and hadn't quite seen one with all of these loops and switchbacks, but it was interesting to read. And good job to staff for kind of smoke and mirrors a little bit, but not really smoke and mirrors, just doing it a different way. So, all right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay. Next agenda item is item 6A, Land Development Code Amendments. Off-street parking and loading requirements, amendments to more provisions for parking design requirements from Chapter 34 to Chapter 10 to more appropriately apply these requirements during the local development order process. And Brandon, would staff like to do all of 6, A, B, and C at once? They're very similar.
Brian's going to present these cases. At the other committee reviews, we have had separate motions for each of them. If you have any recommendations that are different from just the general staff recommendation, we would appreciate it if you provided 3 separate recommendations.
All right, well, we'll take them off A, B, and C. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the LPA. Brian Roberts, Lee County Development Services. Staff has been conducting a review of the Land Development Code and identified some opportunities to improve clarity, efficiency, and consistency, and proposed amendments to 3 areas. These are off-street parking and loading requirements, outdoor lighting standards, and the turn lane exemption. Currently, LDC provisions for parking requirements and off-street loading requirements include determination of required spaces, parking lot design, and off-street loading design are located in Chapter 34, while Chapter 34 addresses the number of spaces based on the use. And this is appropriate. The design requirements for parking are more appropriately applied during the local development order process in Chapter 10. The proposed amendment will relocate design-related parking requirements and off-street loading requirements from Chapter 34 to Chapter 10, while retaining sections that address the number of spaces for specific uses in Chapter 34. This will ensure that design standards for parking are consolidated in Chapter 10, improving consistency and clarity in the development review process. So it just makes changes and moves the Chapter 34 design requirements to Chapter 10 in LDC 10260.
Okay.
And corrects cross-references.
Anybody? Thoughts?
No comments.
My comment is going to be for all three items, but now is as good a time as any. Other than moving text from 34 to 10 and changing references reflective thereto, has there been any changes to the processes or standards or requirements? Is this just merely a relocation of text?
A lot of it is a relocation of the text, but also there's going to be changes to 10-104 that are forthcoming that will allow administrative deviations instead of it being through the variance process because they were located in Chapter 34, but those will be in the next batch of amendments. So it'll make it simpler to go through in a Chapter 10 administrative deviation instead of a variance process.
Sure. Anything other than that?
There is on, I believe it's page 13 of 22 of the change, it's 34-2017D. The reservation for future parking spaces was removed. That portion of the code's never been used. It basically allowed them to not pave certain future parking spaces, but they had to be set aside. They couldn't be used for open space calculations. 26 years of doing this, I've never seen anybody use that portion of the code.
I've read where churches are still allowed to.
They are still allowed under this to use grass parking. That remains.
Okay, so we're not changing the rules, we're just moving the rules.
Moving it to Chapter 10, the change will come when we do the 10-104 change.
Okay. Staff wants separate motions. Do we have a motion on item 6A?
I'll make a motion to approve item 6A for off-street parking and loading requirements.
Thank you.
Second that.
Thank you, Hank. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Brian, 6B is outdoor lighting standards, amendments to similarly relocate outdoor lighting standards from Chapter 34 to Chapter 10 and eliminate requirements that apply only internally to a site and do not affect surrounding properties.
Yeah, there's significant changes to, it is the delete from 34-625 and moving it to Chapter 10. There's significant deletes with this where we're removing a lot of the on-site design requirements that are internal to the site to allow the professionals to design their sites as they see fit. The remaining portions of the code are for the off-site impacts, the heights of the poles, the property line foot candle requirements, and the neighboring residential foot candle requirements. But for the most part, the on-site design requirements, the uplighting requirement does remain that the uplighting be reduced and the flat lenses and cutoff fixtures remain. But as far as the uniformity, minimum foot candle designs, that's all going to be the designer's tools to use on the sites now.
Inside the perimeter.
Inside the perimeter. And again, moving to Chapter 10, it's going to allow us more flexibility in the future. This is something that we're looking at adding to 10-104 as well.
Questions?
You're lucky you didn't have to deal with turtles.
The turtle portion remains. The Chapter 14, I'm not touching that.
Questions?
Make a motion to approve 6B for outdoor lighting standards as stated.
Second?
I'll second.
Second. Any further discussion? I do have a question for you land professionals or land design professionals. They're bifurcating the calculation from 34 to 10 and the requirement in 34. And when you guys are doing your jobs, is it easier to have it bifurcated, or is it easier to have all parking in one spot?
It's easier to do deviations than variances. That's the
Yeah.
benefit, that's the big benefit.
Yeah, I get that, but I mean the relocation of the text.
I think now with how you query, it's not like you have tabs in your hard copies like when I first started. So you're querying now, so by moving it, the people still find it. So I think it's whatever is easiest for staff.
It wouldn't be any harder for me to search for it in section 10 versus where it currently sits. It's very easily accessible.
Just by a search window? All right. Yeah, I have no further thoughts. We had a motion, we had a second on 6B. That was my discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And 6C, gotta go back to the agenda. Turn lane extension exemptions amendment to Chapter 10 to clarify decision-making authority and responsibility for turn lane extension exemptions for private or public lands. Brian?
The current regulation lacks clarity regarding the decision-making authority for the one-time turn lane exemption. It just clarifies that private right-of-ways are the responsibility of the Development Services Manager, and that public right-of-ways lies with the Lee County DOT Director. Just adds that language to it.
Okay, any questions for staff for this?
Make a motion to approve 6C for turn lane extension exemptions.
I'll second it.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion?
I have a little bit of it. On the little detail, with the turn lane detail, that text is so tiny.
Which
On section 10.288, I'm hoping when it goes to the actual, wow, that's tiny. Page 1 of 2.
Understood. We'll take a look at how it comes out. It may be just fit on the page there, as it didn't go to another page.
Or maybe I need to get new glasses.
Yes, showing your age now, Jennifer.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Motion on 6C.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. Second it.
I second.
We got a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. I see the next agenda item is 7 other business. Staff have anything they want to talk about? All right. Are we heading, do we have cases that are impending for March or April?
I believe, I don't think we're going to have anything ready for March for you. We do have some amendments moving through that we are likely to get here for April. So I think we'll be
Good. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
So moved. Thank you, everybody.